welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Today we're pleased to bring you a discussion of the 1991 session of the Idaho legislature. And for you who are viewing this program from other states, we'll be discussing some issues that I'm sure will be pertinent to your legislature, and you might want to compare what is going on in our state in comparison with your legislature. Very pleased to welcome two members of the Idaho legislature to our program, and I congratulate both of these individuals who have just recently been reelected to another term by rather wide margins. First of all, to my far left is Freeman Duncan, a Republican who was just elected to his second term in the Idaho House of Representatives. Welcome to the program, Representative Duncan.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate it.
And next to Representative Duncan is Idaho State Senator Mary Lou Reed, who was just elected to her fourth term in the State Senate. And Senator Reed, we're pleased to have you on the program.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
And as always, I'm very pleased to have Janelle Burke as one of our regular panelists, who is an attorney in Idaho. And I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
I'd like to jump right into what we think are going to be the big issues this session. And so let's start with you, Lou, and can you tell us a little bit about what you think are going to be the big issues this year, and then we'll go on to Freeman. And
well, and maybe we can, Janelle, maybe we can kind of interact, because I think for Freeman and I, since we're both serving on the education committees, he in the House and I in the Senate, I think the education issues are the ones that we look forward to addressing the most, and I think that this is going to be a big year for education. There are two lawsuits dealing with the distribution formula. I think it's going to be important for the legislature to address those lawsuits, and to just really try to come up with a better formula. And there is that issue of whether or not the state is going to assist school districts with their building facilities. I think that's an important issue. Once again, I hope we'll look into what we can do in the state program that would deal with the classroom size issue, kindergarten through third grade. There are lots and lots of issues dealing with education. We also have possibly some community college legislation. I don't know how far that's going to go.
Okay, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what you see the funding picture to be as far as education is concerned, Freeman? How do you see it shaping up?
Well, the appropriation for public ed will probably try to be better than it was last year. The funding distribution problem that Mary Lou's talking about is how do you take that money and parcel it out to the 115 districts and still have a thorough and common system of education. And I agree with Mary Lou. We have got to handle it ourselves and not allow the Supreme Court to do that, as has happened in other states. And
what's the question there? How are the sides dividing up?
We use
all over the board.
We use a system in Idaho that comes up with a fictional classroom unit, and through a bunch of calculations tries to distribute money to school districts based upon what they could raise locally off property taxes, and try to bring people up to some parity there, at the same time what they can expect in classroom size, versus a system like, let's say Minnesota, I think, uses a system where it's totally student head count. If you have the money attaches to the forehead in a sense of a student and goes with them. And we think our system's better, but there are some problems with it. The big school districts are saying that they're not getting their share, because when you rise above a certain number of students, the next student isn't worth as much. The very small school districts are saying we're not being treated fairly. We have problems of economy of scale as small districts, and the middle people are saying, well, we're not sure whether we're treated fairly or not. So it's a real tough decision. In that is the question of school construction too, and whether or not the constitutional guarantee of a common and thorough education also goes to facility issues. And thank goodness to Mary Lou and some other senators, we're going to revisit what to do with the lottery money again this coming session, to see if what I call the trickle-down approach, which was what was used last year, is the right way, or whether we should do something imaginative with it. And I think both Mary Lou and I are for doing something imaginative.
Right, we'd like to start over with that whole issue of school facilities. And one of the concepts that's been tossed around in the past is to start a fund based on the income from the endowment fund, and that would be about $20 million, and then have a system of incentives and grants to to match money from school districts who are choosing to build new facilities. I think there's a lot more support for it this year, don't you,
Yes.
Freeman, than the last year. We heard a lot of this during the election.
As long as it's tied to accountability, Coeur d'Alene is not the only school district in the state where there has been a history of concern over whether the money's being spent correctly and wisely. And we've talked, Mary Lou and I and some others have talked about a system based on accountability where the private sector management of asset approach would be used by school districts and almost force them to use that private sector approach. So you'll hear more about that.
And are we optimistic?
We're optimistic.
You bet.
I failed to make the point when I was introducing our guest that I did indicate that Representative Duncan was a Republican and Mary Lou Reed is a Democrat. And so we have, sounds like some bipartisan support for some of the issues between you two in education that you're interested in. Viewers of this program from out of state may not be aware of the fact that there's been a change in the makeup of the legislature. The Senate, as of the taping of this program in November, had a tie with 21 Democrats and 21 Republicans. The House, there's a sizable margin for the Republican Party. On this issue that you have just discussed and all other educational issues, and there are a number of others, do you think that there'll be a lot of work across the aisle between the parties in dealing with the whole issue of funding for education in the coming session?
Well, clearly in the Senate, there's going to have to be a working bipartisan approach to just about everything. And I think it's a real interesting challenge. See whether or not we really can act very reasonably and responsibly with a tie in the Senate. So everything is going to have to be, we won't be able to get a bill passed that doesn't have bipartisan support.
I haven't seen any partisan issues in the education in the two sessions I've served, Tony. It's more a north-south issue than it is anything else. We are experiencing the growth. They aren't experiencing that. Quite honestly, there's some districts in southern Idaho that look at us bewildered and they say, why are you talking about these school construction problems? We don't have a problem. And we look at them bewildered and say, how can that be? You got to have facilities problems. So that's really been the issue more than Republican, Democrat.
Right. The large growing districts versus the small
Right.
rural is really where the difference comes.
I guess I really have a comprehensive question that deals with funding for education. Both of you are spending a lot of time, and rightly so, emphasizing the facilities problem, that there really is a problem in some districts in the state for public schools, and certainly there's a problem at the higher education level, the college and universities, that there are real gaps in the facilities from a few years back till now when we have not put a lot of money into the permanent building fund. And we also still have always the question of salaries and other issues. I understand that although the economy shows some signs nationally of some problems, that we still are in good shape economically in Idaho and there'll be a surplus again. I guess my very involved question is, do you support use of a lot of that surplus for education, or do you look for new revenue? And while you're answering that, how are we going to tackle the very small funds that we have in the permanent building fund for both education and other buildings, for mental institutions or prisons, whatever it may be? It's a terribly involved question.
Who are you asking this to, Tony?
You want to go first? I think they'll be towards the end of the session, and I'm basing on just two previous sessions, and obviously Mary Lou has a lot more she can base it on. With the surplus, there'll be an attempt, and I think a successful attempt, to once again fund a school improvement idea. Like we did last year, there'll be strings attached, as there have been the last 2 years. But I think the vast majority of the surplus money is probably going to go to local governments for infrastructure problems. Close to $8 billion in road problems. Obviously, there isn't going to be the surplus to do that, but I'm betting that infrastructure problems at the local government level are going to get more surplus money than public ed or higher ed, including the junior college system, which of course has its own funding problem.
Yeah, I don't think I want to bet with you, Freeman. I think you're probably right. I think we're going to be nervous about where the economy's going. So this $45 million surplus is going to be spent on one-time issues, one-time projects. And I think the tangible of bricks and mortar will probably be the direction, and on the local level that may be the place to put it. I think there will be some one-time monies that do go into the education budget, though, that also could address facilities problems. But I think there will be some talk about lowering taxes, but I think this is going to be a very uncomfortable session when it comes to revenue projection. I don't think there's any question of what other states are in such fiscal duress that the fact that Idaho is in good shape is something that we're going to have to deal with very carefully.
And this is a position that Governor Andrus takes too, doesn't he? He is very, very concerned always about the fact that as the economy changes, that one is not in a position of not having some surplus for those lean years.
Mm-hmm. And you certainly don't want to use surplus to build a base figure that's going to be impacted by a 4% inflation factor the next year, because then you don't have the funds to cover even your base.
Janelle Berg.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the infrastructure and what kinds of things you foresee money being spent upon in the state of Idaho in the next few years. Particularly, I'm interested in roads, because we here in North Idaho have some roads that need improvement. Where do you see the infrastructure, the particular appropriations for infrastructure being placed? Do you have an opinion as to where you think they're going to happen? Let's start with Freeman, since the House quite often deals with that first.
Well, if you use last year as an indicator, when we got towards the end of the session where we had a fairly good picture of things money-wise, there was a bill that some might call a Christmas tree bill, but it had actual tangible projects identified, and it seemed like people liked that, where you could say, this district needs this bridge, this district needs this fixed. I would suspect that's easier for people to grab a hold of because it all has a little bit for everybody. If you take $45 million and you just throw it out there to try and solve an $8 billion problem, you don't have anything that you can say, look, we solved that. So I don't think that's not the solution. The solution to the road problem is probably to extend the Highway Trust Fund and to make it eligible for non-interstate projects and keep the federal government from using gas tax money to balance the federal budget. That's the solution to that. When I said infrastructure, I'd like to see us get some more money in the water pollution control account. I think secondary treatment of our water systems is going to become, or the gray water disposal system is going to be necessary. Especially, we're concerned with the Spokane River. How much longer can you dump any quantity of nitrates and phosphates in there? And that's what I was thinking of as infrastructure, where you can actually make a matching grant or a revolving loan or something like that you can get a project done.
It would certainly be good if there could be some matching grants set up, a program in which communities could come to the legislature and say, this is what we have. I suspect Freeman's right, though, that the Christmas tree approach will probably be the way we go. Frankly, I don't particularly like it. I don't think it's a way of doing some good long-range planning. It's more or less just picking things out of the hat and saying, if we give somebody everything, give something for everybody, why then we will be able to pass it. But it works. It works.
A little bit related to that, but not quite on point, is the whole issue of health care and community health care. And I think the legislature has been doing some things in that area recently. And Lou, would you like to start with that?
Well, it's just we have a growing bill for health care every year. I think that the Medicaid program continues to expand, and I think we can really plan on that down the road, that health care will continue to take a larger and larger bite out of the state budget. I think the thing that needs to be addressed in this session is the fact that the legislature took care of the indigency program, took it away from the counties, and so the state is taking over that particular program, but there are lots and lots of bugs and lots of problems. So I think that is going to have to be fine-tuned, and I think it really does deserve to be perfected. There also is the issue of rural health care, and I suspect that the governor may have something in his program that addresses the issue of rural health care.
Well, I agree with Mary Lou. And again, we can't solve the national health care problem at the state level. And if we're really going to try and provide medical insurance for almost everybody at an affordable rate, I think it's going to have to be done at the national level, because I don't see with Idaho's budget how we can do it. We do have to fine-tune the medical indigent legislation. Our heart was in the right place. We were well motivated. We were trying to accomplish property tax relief by shifting about $15 million of county responsibility to the state level. But unfortunately, we left some stranded people. There were some indigent things there that aren't just medically related. So.
And so you see the indigency problem as one that's going to be addressed. And then the rural health care, I know, is another area that a lot of people are interested in, especially in a state like this.
I must admit, your committee assignments somewhat dictate your main focus, and I don't have any health services committee assignments, so I'm pretty much just relating what other people have told me. But do you serve on that committee?
No,
I
no.
know Hildy Kellogg was very active in that, and I don't know if Wally Wright will pick up on that or who will pick up on that. I intend to try and keep my same committees. I don't need to learn any new
and can
tricks.
you tell the viewing audience what are your committees? Let's each one of you tell what committees.
No, I won't
maybe-
interrupt and say that at the time of
You
this
may not.
taping, the assignments haven't been made yet.
Okay, so it probably is a little premature to ask that question. We'll ask it the next time we see you.
Well, I can answer because I think mine will stay because I at least know who's going to be in leadership. I'm going to try and stay on education. I'm going to try and stay on local government. I'm going to try and stay on judiciary rules, and there's no reason to think that I won't be allowed to. So I don't. Mary Lou probably has some chance to advance, where I really don't.
Well, I'm not really sure. I will remain interested on the Resources and Environment Committee in the Senate, and I'm not sure about state affairs. And one of the things that you might want to ask us about is, what is going to happen that is dramatic, and we certainly can't foresee what the governor is going to do. But I think the governor, who is a no-nonsense person, is starting his a new 4-year term, and it will probably be his last term. And I think there should be some speculation as to what are the things that he is going to try to accomplish that will really make an impact.
And leave his mark on the state.
And leave his mark. And of course one of them is, will he indeed take on the issue of tax reform, and especially sales tax reform? I don't know. None of us are really that privy to his inner thoughts. But I think we should be anticipating that there will be some major efforts made by the governor to put forth a program that will be in concert with the legislature, but will be an Andrus program.
An issue that we can't avoid, and I'll start with Senator Reed on this issue. It's not just Idaho, but 50 state legislatures will convene, and they will deal with that topic that is dealt with every 10 years. That's reapportionment. And in doing that, history has taught me, as I have reviewed that in all 50 states, that whatever year that reapportionment is dealt with, a lot of the issues that you've discussed and are very, very important sometimes take a back seat because the legislature becomes so involved with how their district will look next time. And my studies have indicated that sometimes the anger gets to be so great that it affects voting on other pieces of legislation as people are offended by what other legislators do to districts. So what do you predict? And I guess I also would like to ask, do you think that will be dealt with in 91 or 92, since you have 2 sessions to deal with reapportionment? And what is your prediction?
Professor Stewart, you are so modest. You are not telling our viewers or reminding them that the current apportionment plan that the Idaho legislature has is a plan that you drew and was imposed upon the legislature by a judge through a lengthy court process. And so I think that 14B, your plan, has been a very workable one, but we will be forced to reduce the number of legislators, both in the Senate and the House, and I think it's going to be a grand battle because of the fact that we will probably lose at least 7 senators in the Senate. And how many do you expect in the House, Freeman?
Well, I think statutorily, unless changed, it goes down to.
Yeah, you lose 14 in the House.
14.
There's a minimum of
Doesn't it?
7 in the Senate, 14 in the House. That'll be a minimum of 21 legislators.
14 in the House, yeah.
Uh-huh.
You can have a maximum of 35 senators and 70 in the House.
I say it'll take 2 sessions.
Well, I'd have to yield to that, and I didn't know. I guess if I thought about it, I would know it was a contentious issue, but I'm not easily offended, so I think there's a pretty good chance I'll serve on the House committee to deal with that, being the only remaining Republican in the 5 northern counties. So I think I have a pretty good chance of being tapped, but I don't intend to let that issue stop the agenda that I want to see passed. But if history shows that happens, I can understand what you're saying.
Well, I certainly hope that the legislature gives some thought to a commission to take it on. I think that history also shows that legislatures have a very hard time reapportioning themselves. And it should be given, I think, to an objective body to make those decisions.
One other thing on that, and that is the states that have, and there are only about 12, 13 that have what we call reapportionment commissions, and our neighbor, the state of Washington, has placed it in their state constitution, and they used it the last time. And I believe it was approximately 9 days it took the commission to reapportion both the state legislature and the congressional districts, and there was no court litigation.
There was no court.
Yes. It was very, I don't mean that every state's had the same amount of success with the commission plan, but they've had more success with commissions than they have had with the legislative process. And oftentimes it takes 2 to 4 years with both the legislature acting and the courts. And I'll just add one footnote that out of the 50 states since 1962, 31 states have had a plan in place for at least one election that was not a legislative approved plan. It was court mandated or commission. So I don't want to spend the rest of the time on the program on this issue, but it is something that will take a lot of time and focus. I guess I will have one more procedural question, and that is there's more than one way of going. And I guess I'd ask if the legislature does it, which would be your approach. The last time there was a joint committee of the House and Senate to draw plans and then submit that to the House and Senate. The period before that, they broke the state into regions, and then legislators from that region were given a quote of how many seats they would have, and they would work out the districts for that region. Do either one of those methods or another method you think would be most acceptable if the legislature does the plan?
Well, the way it was done in '82, Tony, when you people took it to court, was really terrible. So whatever method that was, I think it should be
That was
rejected.
a joint committee of both houses?
That was a joint committee. Well, that didn't work.
That was before Senator Reed was in the legislature. Or Representative
Well, up
Duncan,
until that
one-
comment, I was going to say the joint committee made more sense, but
It does. It sounds like
I really can't comment, Tony. I don't know enough about it. I guess it'll be interesting.
Thank you.
I'll call you.
Janelle Berg.
I'm going to ask about some environmental issues. Environment is very important to those of us who live in North Idaho because we are dependent upon it in many ways. Of course, people are everywhere, but we, I think, have a greater awareness of it than some other parts of the state. What kinds of issues do you see being addressed in this particular session of the legislature with regard to environment, water quality included among those? Mary Lou?
Long list. Freeman, you want me to start?
Go ahead,
I think
yeah.
that no question, the issue of water quality funding is going to be right up there. This legislature did not come through last year. So the Clean Lakes Act, which I certainly hope will be funded, that's important. The solid waste issues have not been adequately addressed, and I hope that there will be a solid waste planning bill. There must be something that is going to help the counties and the local communities with this growing problem of what do we do with our garbage, and are we actually going to take on recycling. Then there's something called outstanding resource waters, which includes Priest Lake. This is a designation that is a new designation. Priest Lake has applied, or some people have applied on behalf of Priest Lake. I think that's going to take a lot of time. There continues to be this issue of the fact that Southern California and even perhaps southern Idaho are looking at the water of North Idaho. I think down the line, the quantity of water will always be a very, very important issue in any one of the arid western states. And so I think that there may be some housekeeping related to making sure that the waters from North Idaho are actually appropriated so that they are perhaps safe, if they can be safe, from a raid from any other portion of the country. That's a start.
Well, I have to agree with Mary Lou. The Clean Lakes Council has really proved workable, and the governor really used foresight in the people he appointed to that. And I think the rifts and the questions and the territorial issues have maybe gone away, that we can get that funding solved this year. And certainly I'll work to get the proper funding. And we did last year. We just were in a small minority. The solid waste recycling is probably ready. Representative Vickers from Lewiston has had some excellent bills that were so intricate so ahead of their time that they didn't get very far. But she's modified those, and she'll be back with it, I'm sure. And the main opponent of that lost in the recent election, and who happened to be a committee chairman. So I think the House is probably going to come out with some form of recycling to get that started. Just in Kootenai County, we can see what the landfill problems are. And
now, there are
clean air. I think we probably will be dealing with some of the difficult issues around that most complex situation of field burning. So
now,
I think there will be.
I vote we not deal with the complex issue of field burning.
Now, there are some issues that you're not going to deal with this year by virtue of the fact that they've probably been solved or maybe gone away. What kinds of things, starting with Freeman, do you see that have been solved in the past by the legislature, and we probably aren't going to see them again?
Well, obviously the easiest one, I'm glad I got to go first, it's probably the easiest one to do is the Human Rights Day, and I've got to really congratulate Tony and all the hard work he put into that. When we see what's going on right now in the national media with Arizona, New Hampshire, and Montana, I just feel so good that I finally voted for that bill, because we
don't
could
need
be
that kind of publicity.
We could be on that list with people refusing to come to the Coeur d'Alene Resort, and conventions being canceled, and the Super Bowl not being played, and you know, the people that push that, I know Mary Lou worked so hard on that too, really to be congratulated, because we would have just shot ourselves in the foot, and I'm glad that's over. I hope abortion's over as far as the issue it was last year, but I guess I'm not sure that that's true. But I would think the recent election would have told people something about how the majority of people in Idaho feel. So I hope that doesn't come back and we don't spend as much time on it if it does come back.
Well, I agree with both those. I think we feel very good about the fact that the human rights legislation that Idaho has is, I think, very solid, and it's taken 4 years to go through step by step, and certainly Martin Luther King Day was really the icing on the cake. And I sincerely hope that we will not see any kind of legislation dealing with abortion, and it is my prediction that we will not see a comprehensive abortion bill. There may be some small bills, or maybe some parental consent bills, but I think a head-on confrontation will not happen, and I certainly hope it will not, because it took entirely too much time, energy, legislative spirit.
I have to interrupt. I've got the signal we're out of time, but I do want to take time to commend both of you for all your hard work in the human rights package that has become law and other things, and you're both very congenial. I know you're going to work together in the next session. We thank you and wish you well.
Thank you.
On behalf of our people.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you've enjoyed our program with Senator Mary Lou Reed and Representative Freeman Duncan, and I'd like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we will discuss an important issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.